Plan. The comp plan calls for this body to explore additions of compatible uses in the agricultural district. With regard to the zoning code, these uses are complementary to the existing permitted uses and don't conflict with any of the other types of accessory dwellings or buildings that would be allowed. And the general public benefit is the allowance and inclusion of additional residential housing opportunities in the agricultural district. This can help not only offset additional revenue streams for a property, including agricultural tourism that this body talked about, but can also support just aging in place or people allowing for family living situations of all different kinds. So staff does find that it is in conformance with the requirements set forth in the city code for the issuance or for approval of an ordinance amendment. And if the council is favorable after holding a public hearing, the commission should move to recommend the council adopt ordinance amending title, what is XB, guys? I don't know, 15 land use usage, chapter 153 zoning code related to the inclusion of accessory dwelling units in the agricultural zoning district.
Any questions, staff? Susan?
Abby, you've got, provided the parking requirement is met for the principal single-family dwelling, no additional parking is required for the accessory dwelling.
That is correct.
So if you had, we'll just say a four-bedroom home, realizing that you've got 800 square feet, four-bedroom, or the principal dwelling could be of a significant size with living rooms and family rooms and yada, yada, yada. So you could have a 2 or 3 bedroom accessory dwelling unit, even with the 800 square feet and the 400 some odd, 600 on the second floor. So you could have 2 or 3 bedrooms in this accessory dwelling unit. And I'm concerned about parking.
Then not allowing for
Yes.
any.
In other words, I would be much more comfortable with this if there was, additional parking requirement consistent with the number of bedrooms in the accessory dwelling unit or some way of dealing with this. But again, we do require, even in rural residential, that they be paved or hard surface, all-weather parking. These are areas where we're closer to some of our lakes and our water bodies. And if it is not hard surface, rutting and things like that are going to be a problem. Otherwise, this looks really interesting.
Just to answer your question, or just to address the concern, Commissioner Young, currently we require parking based on units, not necessarily bedrooms. So for a single family dwelling, no matter the size, we would require 2 parking spaces. I can look to see if we have an apartment requirement or, those attached apartments, whether or not we have a separate parking space requirement. I believe we do, and I can look at that while we're holding the public hearing, clearly taking all the public testimony of folks that are interested in this tonight, and get back to you in the discussion portion about that requirement.
You understand my concern?
Yep.
If I may, is the concern the number of spaces or that they be paved, or both?
That there is a parking requirement associated with the accessory units. So that just as we have a parking requirement for principal dwellings, it's fairly certain that we are going to be adding a car or 2 or whatever. I want to make sure that there is a hard surface location for those also.
Other questions of staff? I have one. It's regarding garages. We seem to be in love with garages on the planning commission. The bigger, the better. Can they use part of that 800 square feet if they want a single car garage, or would that have to be an accessory dwelling? And not accessory dwelling, it would have to be an accessory structure.
I don't see why they couldn't. I think that the commission may want to put in the requirement that the 800 square feet would encapsulate any sort of attached garage so that they wouldn't necessarily try to come in with an 800 square foot residence and then want to put a 200 foot garage, square foot garage on that.
That would be my concern. Other than that, to me, 4, 8, and 9, there's a little redundancy there, but I can live with it, you know, that you cover parking and single utilities, and then you cover them each separately, so, and I'm fine with that. I'm not gonna worry too much about that. Any other comments for staff? Kevin?
Abby, we talked about a lot of things when we talked about this the last time. Is there, has there been any discussion about licensing going along with this? You know, I'm not 100% comfortable with accessory dwelling units. I told you that last time when we had this discussion. But one of the things that would make me much more comfortable is some sort of a licensing that goes with this. Also, if it's going to be used as a VRBO or a rental, a limit or a minimum time frame that it can be rented for. So it's not an overnight weekend thing, it's maybe a 30-day thing or a week thing or a 2-week thing. You know, not just these 24-hour parties that we see in some of these VRBOs that go on. And I know there's ways around that, but also if there's been any consideration to these VRBOs, because originally the accessory dwelling units came about because of, you know, elder care and things like that, but you know, it doesn't seem like family members are the ones being given the opportunity to do this. Maybe that's the way it intentionally starts out, but then all of a sudden it turns into a rental. Can we look at some sort of restrictions on that as well? Any considerations that you guys talked about at staff?
We haven't. The city itself has talked at times about rental licensing program, rental inspection programs. I do believe there is something in the comp plan about exploring those programs as part of this comp plan cycle. We didn't as part of this accessory dwelling unit review. We did discuss, though, requiring the property to be homesteaded so that the owner would be, or an owner family member would be on site that would help eliminate or reduce some of the nuisances that can go along with if something was a short-term home rental. That's not to say that all of these would be short-term home rentals.
How would taxes work then on?
They would be taxed at a residential rate just along with.
Assess the property values and
Yep, and that would be done at after the building permitting, just through any of our standard.
but as part of the zoning text amendment, we could add, if everybody agreed, to some sort of a license.
We could, we're not quite prepared to do that. I think that if that was the desire of the commission, or even recommending, you know, to the council, that sort of provision, that we would probably need to hold off on the approval of an ordinance of this nature until we had the framework for a licensing program in place.
Susan?
That brings up something that I hadn't thought about. One assumes that someday this property might be sold, and it might be sold to somebody who was not going to be homesteading it. Would we then require that the accessory dwelling unit be torn down? This says it shall be on a homesteaded property.
I think the city ordering any residence to be torn down is going to be a dicey political move.
I agree, but
This will be recorded, so I guess it wouldn't be recorded against the property because there wouldn't be review of it. It would be allowed by building permit.
but you're not going to be able to enforce the homesteaded in the future, and so the potential for me to build this and you know, I'm getting older and perhaps I don't want to keep my 20 acres forever and ever, but it would really increase the value of my property if I could have an accessory dwelling unit. So I'm homesteaded now, and we're going to build this, and then my daughter can sell the property and yeah.
You have a valid,
Concern.
You have a valid point. The homesteading requirement would be a difficult one to enforce. If we were able to find it, we definitely could start proceedings of a zoning violation, but that is a harder one to enforce. It was one way in which the staff and the commission discussed just reducing the potential nuisance that could be created by adding another unit on a property.
But licensing would do that.
But the license for the construction of a building,
No, but I mean, if you built the building and we had licensing requirements and they violated some of the conditions of the licensing, they would have to.
if it was a rental.
Right.
Yeah.
We have several Airbnbs already in Forest Lake.
Other comments, questions for staff? This is a public hearing. The way this will work this evening is anyone who wishes to speak to this application or the zoning text amendment, we ask you come up, state your name and address for the record, spend a couple minutes giving us your thoughts. Once we have heard from everyone, we will come back to the planning, we'll close the public hearing, it'll come back to the planning commission to make a recommendation to city council. So this public hearing is for ordinance 718, a zoning text amendment, accessory dwelling unit. We will have a separate one for item B. So we will open the public hearing at 7:21 p.m. Does anyone wish to speak to this application? Karen, do we have any emails to be read in or anyone online?
Chair Gerard, I don't have any other information. No one's online.
Thank you. Wait a few seconds in case there's a rush at the door.
Dan Hebert, 12685 170th Street North in Marion St. Croix. Gone Companies too. I'm going to be presenting a little bit later, but I had a question. Would the ordinance, so what would be if someone had dwelling units and did accessory unit and was able to, let me first ask you this, is renting out a single family home allowable in Forest Lake?
It is. The city does not currently have any rental regulations.
Okay, do you need to have a license to rent out your dwelling?
You do not need a rental license for a long or short-term rental within the community.
Okay, so there's no VRBO, any language in the code right now?
Nope.
Okay.
Currently,
Oh, currently, okay. And so if someone were to build this accessory unit and have the parking requirement, then how could you make the person tear the building down if it's no longer homesteaded? Because obviously, if someone rents it out, a dwelling without the ancillary dwelling, don't they, I mean, why would you then try to put some sort of regulation on two dwellings that meet the parking code and not just one dwelling? Because right now there's no permit for rental.
Yeah.
The reason that I brought it up is that in order to have an accessory dwelling unit, the proposed ordinance says that the property must be homesteaded, right? In order to have an accessory dwelling unit, the property must be homesteaded. But if in the future, the property were to be sold and the new owner did not homestead the property, then it no longer meets the requirements of the ordinance. And my question was, how are we going to enforce the ordinance? It doesn't make sense to have an ordinance provision that you're not going to enforce.
Sure.
And so either, revoking the certificate of occupancy or, and having them turn it into a storage unit or something. But if we're going to have the requirement that it be homesteaded property to have an accessory dwelling unit, then as a planning commission, we need to think beyond just today when somebody wants to build a unit. We need to make sure that we are thinking about future considerations, things that could happen in the future.
Yeah, so why would you think you would need to have it homesteaded to be part of the zoning and to have an ancillary unit? to be homesteaded, I guess. I guess that's what question, I think a bigger, broader question is why would it need to be homesteaded?
Chair, if I may, just to address the question, the concern of the commission was the addition of smaller units and secondary units on properties and the influx of vacation rentals that a community can see in sometimes in these smaller units, and whether or not the homesteading would help reduce the potential nuisance an accessory dwelling could create if it became a nuisance vacation rental. That the homestead, the nature of it being homestead and the owner or a family member being there would help reduce the potential nuisance. That was where the provision kind of was born out of.
So the mechanism is homestead, not regulation on or permitting on VRBO and short term?
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this text amendment? I'll ask one more time, Karen, has anyone jumped online to,
No one has. I don't have anyone waiting online to speak.
thank you. Since we have no one online and no one seems to be coming up to the lectern, we will close the public hearing at 7:26 PM and bring it back to the commission for further discussion.
Chair Gerard, may I just, I took an opportunity to take a look at the parking code. The parking code does require multiple units for single family, or multiple parking spaces for single family. Even multiple families is supposed to be 2 spaces per dwelling unit. So I think the inclusion of another space or 2 is consistent with the code. We don't have a separate, I was surprised, but I couldn't find, I couldn't necessarily find one for apartments, a parking requirement. So I was kind of thinking of this as more like that apartment nature, but thank you, Chair.
So then you're saying we could change item 8 that says that's something to the effect that the accessory dwelling unit will require,
Minimum of 1 or 2 parking spaces as per the parking requirements.
yeah, whichever number we're all happy with. Susan?
Chair, I brought up some additional things for me to consider. I would like to know, either from staff, if you know it tonight, or from perhaps the city attorney, what are the consequences, or what happens when a property with an ADU is no longer homesteaded?
I think, I certainly can ask that question. I think the question that, and the public testimony was also kind of questioning is, we're using the homestead requirement to potentially reduce a nuisance, whereas I think Commissioner Miller is maybe suggesting, why wouldn't we consider a licensing program to reduce a nuisance? I think at this time, it would probably make more sense that if we find that these are nuisances, that we explore some sort of a licensing program more than a homestead program.
Are we thinking of doing anything, licensees in general in Forest Lake for rentals?
Not.
Not
it
high
is-
on the list, but is it some in the back of somebody's mind?
It is. But it is not high on the list at the moment.
Way back.
Kevin?
It would be, in my humble opinion, something that I don't think we should vote on tonight personally. I think we need some more information. I would encourage us to get more information. One of the things that I would encourage us to get is to talk to the local police department here and see how many reports they've had of problems at VRBOs in our community. And I know of a couple recently on the lake. So I think if we don't take action today, as we're proposing and putting this text amendment forward to allow these, if that's what we decide to do ultimately, if we don't have some sort of protections here, we're going to create more issues than I think we all want to deal with. From a city standpoint, I think they could tell us, from the police standpoint, if they've had some disturbances, if they've had some challenges on these in the city. So we'd have a little bit more information. One of the ways that we can at least deal with it if there's issues is with the licensing. I think that should be something we should consider as part of this. Personally, that's just my opinion.
Susan?
There have been challenges in the past with some rental properties, single-family home rental properties, duplex rental properties. And the response is, well, we don't have a rental licensing ordinance, so there's really nothing we can do. Until it becomes something where we can bring in the Washington County Health Department on a health and safety violation, it doesn't happen. One of the challenges with rental properties is making sure that there are, working fire alarms and smoke detectors and things like that. And I know I hate adding another set of regulations, but we are getting to the point as a community where we have a significant number of homes that are rental properties. We have a very significant number of properties that are high-rise apartment buildings. And I think it is probably time for us to consider that. I'd like to make a motion to table this, not indefinitely, but until we have some better information about plans for enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance and some of our what-if questions.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
I got a motion and a second. It's a non-debatable motion. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just for staff's benefit, I noted, looking at the ordinance, questions about number 1, the homestead question. Number 4, we were talking about tweaking the language about sharing the driveway and utilities. And then number 8 about the parking standards. Possibly number 5, language about would it include an additional garage space or not within the 800 square feet? Were there any other things that we need to look at for direction purposes?
One of the questions that I would have of staff is whether or not, because it's going to come to us, there's a house, there is an accessory dwelling unit. Well, now we want an additional garage. So what would be our position there, or what are the thoughts of staff about, 2 years in, well, we need a garage for our accessory dwelling unit. Would a second garage on this 5 acre, where would we be in terms of accessory buildings or outbuildings?
Got to get over 10 to get more than one, I believe.
We can verify there. I think it's more than one that is permitted. There is a very specific code section on accessory buildings in the Ag District that we can point out for you in your next meeting. I appreciate City Planner Roberts' just clarification on which of the ordinance items for consideration tonight. One of the things I would like a little bit more direction on as well is we kind of went from, we're looking at a structure, an accessory dwelling unit use, and we went into rental. And so we certainly can bring this back to this commission. I don't know that the city is going to be exploring rental regulations in the time period that the accessory dwelling unit ordinance would be in the Planning Commission's hands. And so I just want to clarify, you're looking for the city staff to be what with regard to rental regulations? I heard about asking about police department complaints on VRBOs. Is it police department complaint on any rental? Because we're not considering VRBOs tonight, we're considering the dwelling unit itself.
I was just suggesting licensing regarding the accessory dwelling units. And necessarily, you don't necessarily have to make a licensing requirement for every rental in the city. But with this ordinance, we could make it regarding this specific use.
Sure, it might
I
be.
don't think we can enforce the homestead thing. I think
Yeah.
that's wording that has to be changed. because they're not all gonna be homesteaded. There's gonna be people that are gonna buy these properties that are gonna want to use them as a business of some sort. And then maybe the other thing to consider is what are the uses we're gonna permit in these accessory dwelling units?
It would be living. They're not, I mean, they're,
So they'd only be
They're
able to
dwelling.
be living dwellings. They couldn't be used for a lemonade stand.
Well, it dep- it's a very great point, and it's a very great point, but they are defined as a dwelling unit. They are for living space. So it's good to know that Commissioner Miller, you were more concerned about the license of the ADU. We can talk with our legal team about that it wasn't necessarily about all rentals or all short-term home rentals in the community, because that could really trip up the ADU. And then we can also explore how it could or could not be in conflict with some of those other types of, even something as what seems a little minor as a home occupation.
And I own rentals, and I'm not opposed to a policy in the city for rentals either, but I think it's something we need to look at somewhere along the line here.
Susan?
And these are only for agriculturally zoned, no rural estate, no rural residential.
Correct, only in the agricultural district.
So this is essentially 10 acres.
I believe our lot size is a minimum of 5 in the agricultural district. We'll go back and just verify that.
Thank you very much.
But so it's a small percentage of the city that this would be starting with. Sorry.
Created a significant amount of pain.
Any other questions from staff to the planning commission? We've had our motion, we need to move on.
I'm sorry, sir.
So staff, any further clarification questions?
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6B, a public hearing for ordinance number 719, a zoning text amendment for the MXR1. I believe, Abby, you're presenting for this also?
I am. So in 2021, this body, along with the city's EDA and the city council, started discussions about the city's ability to gain conformance with the 2040 comp plan, and specifically the land use classification, the low to medium density residential district, or classification that's identified in the future land use map. That is mostly identified on our current zoning map as MXR1. And as this commission is aware, the MXR1 zoning district's minimum lot standard is not aligned with the low to medium density residential future land use category. So in 2022, we really hit some big discussion strides on minimum lot sizes, setbacks. We talked all about potential design standards for how we could amend the MXR1 district to be more in conformance with the 2040 comp plan. I would say overall, we gained some general consensus about minimum lot sizes, setbacks, that sort of thing. And we ended up with staff has some recommendations tonight in ordinance format, which are more in alignment with the comp plan, but also then with neighborhoods that have been approved within the city of Forest Lake by this body, by the city council in the last 20 years. So once again, for zoning ordinance text amendments, you must find that they're consistent with the comp plan, the zoning code, and that there's a general public benefit to this. So the comp plan is an easy box to check. We're doing this to gain conformity with the comp plan. The zoning code, so we'll kind of run through really quick that ordinance, just as I did in the last section here. What staff would be proposing is a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet. I will note for the record and for this commission, staff is starting to change a little bit of the format which some of these minimum lot standards look like in the zoning code. Right now, all of the information you see in the box that is on page 70 or on the page 60 of 70 in your packet is all in text format right now. It's really hard for city staff to actually, and for the general public to read. So We'd be looking at minimum lot sizes of 7,500 square feet when there's city water and sewer, without city water and sewer, 10 acres. Those are consistent with other zoning districts where we do end up, where we have already approved. I'll note for the record that that would, at 7,500 square feet, we'd have a density of 5.8 gross acres. But as noted in my staff report, and as we've discussed, that even though when we're looking at these neighborhoods that have that 8,000 square foot range, we're still end up with significantly less net density. Chestnut Creek, I believe it was, for example, ended up with a density of 1.9 units per acre. And that's really part of the reason why we're bringing those lot sizes down, is to get in alignment with the comp plans on 3 to 6 units per acre. One thing I'll note on page 60 is currently the code does not require a minimum square footage for townhome dwellings when there is an HOA. Right now, as it's proposed in the ordinance, it requires a minimum of 5,000 square feet. The city attorney did talk with me earlier today about townhome dwellings. The state requires that there is an HOA for all townhome neighborhoods. The current code does not have a minimum lot size for a townhome dwelling when there is an HOA, so the commission may want to discuss that minimum lot requirement for a townhome dwelling. Minimum widths being proposed are single family would be 65 square feet wide, 300 feet in a neighborhood without sewer or water. The reason that we proposed that 65 square feet was to accommodate setbacks on either side of the property.
5 feet, not square feet, correct?
65 feet width, yes.
Thank you.
To accommodate setbacks so that there'd be 15 feet between buildings on each side. That combined 15-foot setback would really give a 50-foot building pad, which we're hearing in the market is kind of a very desirable building pad in the modern or standard suburban residential development that we see today. We took a look at setbacks. We talked at quite a bit of depth about garage setbacks and the design and shape of our neighborhoods in the future. The commission kind of landed on requiring houses to be 25 feet, that principal dwelling, but requiring garages to be 30 feet from that front yard, really encouraging a stepped design and trying to push the garage back. The commission was well aware that somebody might just push their house 30 feet back, and that's what we'd end up getting. So that's the highlight of the code changes that have been discussed. Some of the other changes in this ordinance are really just cleaning up some of the code sections, gaining consistency with state laws, that sort of thing. Overall, when we're looking at this ordinance and we look at the public benefit, really consistency in our neighborhoods is a very big public benefit. The public, our general development community, want to know that if one MXR zoned property in the southeast corner can have X standards, a property in the northwest corner zoned MXR could have the same standards. Aligning our MXR district with past practices and the comp plan is overall an asset to the community. So staff finds that it is in conformance to the comprehensive plan, that there's no conflicts with the zoning code, and there is a general public benefit. These are the findings that need to be made for granting or recommending approval of a zoning ordinance text amendment. Once again, this is a public hearing, so the commission should open the public hearing, take public testimony, have conversation. After that has occurred, staff would recommend the commission move to recommend the city council adopt ordinance repealing and replacing Title 15 Land Usage, Chapter 153, Section 320, Mixed Residential, Single Family, and Townhouse MXR 1 District. And I am available if you have any questions.
Questions? I'll start. In your narrative on page 55, you talk about HOAs. If there's an HOA, there's no minimum lot frontage?
Correct, in our current zoning district.
And that would include single-family and townhouse? It just says if there's an HOA. So if you had an HOA for single-family homes, you would have no lot width?
No, that was for townhomes. That was an error. The code currently does not require a minimum lot area for townhomes where an HOA is present.
We don't require it if it's not present, right?
We require 5,000 square feet if an HOA is not present. But what I've learned from the city attorney is when you have a townhome, you have to have an HOA, and therefore, by default, our code would say there would not to be a minimum lot requirement.
We have house size or unit size minimums.
As per the building code,
Per
zoning
building
code does have some, they're slightly in conflict with the building code.
All right, and then moving on to page 58, which is part of the ordinance change 719 in 153.320A. You, on the third line, it's a maximum of 7 units per building.
Oh,
Then you go down to B2 and it says 8.
and that was a last minute change. We were discussing how we gained consistency with other sections of the code where that single family attached housing varies. It really should be consistent with B2, the 8 units per building maximum, each having its own separate entrance. I apologize for that error.
So in A, it should say 8.
Correct.
Otherwise, it was perfectly clear to me. Other comments, questions? Don?
I have a question on building height, just because I haven't had this come up since I've been here. Do we measure that from the front elevation, the back elevation? If it's a walkout built into the side of a hill, how do we determine that?
Yes. Oh,
So every elevation is looked at in a maximum 35?
if I recall, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I recall the code correctly, if it's walkout, then it's taken at the midpoint of the slope to the back and then measured up. And that's to the midpoint of the roof. It's not to the peak of the roof.
Oh, I mean, that's clearly defined in there somewhere, or?
That's
I'm
how,
gonna look right now.
I
how
just
we
see that-
measure height is based on the, likely on the definition for building height,
Okay,
not in each specific code. So each specific zoning code would say you can have this maximum, but how we measure height is usually in a separate section.
it's defined somewhere else, okay.
Yep, so building height is the vertical distance between the highest adjoining ground level within 5 feet of the building, or 10 feet above the lowest ground level within 5 feet of the building, whichever's lower, and the highest point of a flat or mansard roof, or the average height of the highest gable or pitched or hipped roof. So you're taking essentially that average elevation of the bottom and the average elevation of the roof, and that's where you get your.
Okay. Yeah, it just looked very simplified here, so I just thought,
It's sometimes
But,
when you
yeah.
see something so simple in a zoning code, you
oh,
think,
yeah.
what's wrong
yeah,
with it?
yeah.
Susan?
Y'all had asked us to take a look at the bridle passes and the evergreen ridges and the headwaters. And everything since 2006, and all except one of those those subdivisions has a 30-foot rear setback. But what you have in your proposed ordinance is a 20-foot rear yard setback. I'm hoping that the 20-foot is an error, and that as you had asked us to look at, we were looking at 30-foot rear yard setbacks in the proposed ordinance.
Chair Gerard, Commissioner Young, members, I remember us talking about minimum setbacks, and I remember the commission kind of saying that there wasn't really a strong preference for a minimum setback. That's certainly something that I think this commission can revisit before making a recommendation. That's up to this commission, for sure.
You have a 20-foot rear yard.
Yes, we do. In setback requirements, it is indicated 20 foot. I had believed we had discussed that, but I may be in error in that.
I am still very, very concerned that the vast majority of our developable area in the city is now MXR. And I understand the desire of developers and of planners and folks to have all of our subdivisions in all our city look alike and be alike and be consistent. But I am still very concerned that there is so much of our properties that will have these requirements, especially if it's only a 20-foot rear yard setback. We're gonna need a lot more parks, but I want to make sure that the rear yard is the 30-foot that we discussed and were presented to us as the model for Forest Lake.
Thank you. Other comments? Hearing none, this is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to this application, we ask you come up, state your name and address, and spend a couple minutes discussing this text amendment. Once we have heard from all parties, we will close the public hearing and bring it back for a recommendation to the city council. So based on that, we will open the public hearing at 7:51 PM. Does anyone wish to speak to this zoning text amendment? I repeat, does anyone wish to speak to the zoning text amendment? Karen, do we have anyone online or any emails that need to be read in?
Sure, Gerard, I don't have anyone.
Thank you. Wait a few seconds in case they're all in the hall. We really should have the Jeopardy theme play about now. I'll ask one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to the zoning text amendment? No one has come online, Karen?
No one.
Thank you. See no one come forward and no one being online, we will close the public hearing at 7:52. Bring it back to the commissioner for more discussion and a decision.
It could be, Chair Gerard, we've just talked this one through.
Um,
It could just be that we've just talked this one through, right?
Well, I would concur, you know.
If I might, just a second, the one thing I would like the commission just to discuss, that minimum dwelling size for townhome, what's published in the ordinance is 5,000 square feet. The code currently allows down to 0, whether or not the commission would want to stick with the 0 versus the 5,000 square feet. The other things that I heard, I think the easy minor change from in that purpose statement that we talked about. Otherwise, I heard that there was concern about the 20-foot rear yard setback. So those are areas in which I think the commission might want to focus on if there are additional topics of conversation, if those are additional topics of conversation.
So if I understand this right, our townhouses are required to have an HOA.
State law does require townhomes to have an HOA.
So that automatically,
It today would put them automatically in a district that, or an area that allows no minimum lot area. As it's drafted right now, it's drafted at 5,000 square feet. So if the commission wanted to change that, now would be the time.
does the state have anything say about that?
The minimum lot area? No. And if there was no discussion and somebody wanted to make a motion, it could be a motion moving to recommend the ordinance with a minor change to the purpose statement, change to the townhome dwelling size to no minimum lot area and a rear yard setback of 30 feet. Just saying.
Personally, I'd like to see the lot size for a dwelling townhouse to be at 5,000 square feet. So we would just,
Keep
because
it.
it's going to be with an HOA.
There will be an HOA.
Yeah, so I think you can kill the one line that says lot with dwelling townhouse, because that can't even exist. But then dwelling townhouse with HOA, I think should be 5,000 square feet. My opinion. I'm with Susan. I'm kind of into the deeper setback in the rear yard. Try that again. Rear yard. A little more than 20. I don't care if it's 25 or 30, but I think we should have a little more. Because they can still put a fence back there, and the
Yep.
garage can be how far back then if they had it detached?
10 feet off each property line.
Yeah. So,
So just to get things started and so that we can do some discussion, I'm going to move approval of the ordinance, correcting the, in 153.3.0, 320A with a maximum of 8 units per building.
Can I note maximum 8 units per building with each with its own separate entrance as noted earlier?
Yes, ma'am. And where did the,
So, and then in
Uh,
section G, the
F.
setback requirement?
and in section F, all dwellings, townhomes, with or without HOA, that it be 5,000 square feet. And that in section G, the rear yard setbacks for principal structures and accessory structures attached be 30 feet.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If I may, Susan, to strike line 2 in the lot width of F, since it's required to have an HOA, and then the top one, just have it with HOA. It's
Yes.
since state law requires an HOA.
Yeah, yep. I think by the final version, and it'll be substantially similar, what's discussed here, that we'd take out some of this text in here that's not necessary.
I would consider that friendly, sir.
Thank you. I'll
Chair
second
Gerard.
that. Yes, sir.
Should the word minimum be stated in G? Minimum setback requirements? I don't see anywhere minimum stated in, under G. And that's what all those numbers are, minimums, right? Whereas on F, we say minimum lot requirements. I would think we would want to say minimum setback requirements.
Thank you, and I would consider that a friendly amendment also.
Outstanding, sir. I will
Hey,
second
I had to
that.
chime in some.
Along those lines, in H, we indicate building height, we would want to note maximum building height.
Yeah, you would actually, yes.
That's in
Just
the,
say
It does say that in the
Text.
quote, in text.
Perfect.
yeah.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
first ordinance amendment.
Maybe slow, but we get to the finish line.
Seconded the motion.
I did.
Paul did.
Paul did.
Chair Gerard, sorry.
Paul did.
Compromise is possible. Rare, but possible.
All right. We will move to item number 7. It's a discussion item for the GONE preliminary concept review. This will not have a public hearing this evening. It's just a concept review, and concept reviews, as we recall, do not have us vote on them, but we provide input to the applicant. We've seen this once before, so Abby, I'm sure you're here to enlighten us on where we sit now.
Sure. In your October meeting, in a meeting in October, I don't remember which one, forgive me, you looked at a redevelopment project at the southeast corner of Broadway and Highway 61. The Planning Commission reviewed this and expressed support for the overall development mass, the uses, the density. You did note some concerns for parking, the possibility of reducing the height at that northern property boundary to kind of reduce the tunneling effect along the Broadway. But overall, there was a general consensus and encouragement for the development to continue to refine their plans. And this commission said, come on back next time you'd like to. So since that time, they have refined their plans. The total unit count originally was proposed to be 100. It's now 80 residential units, 20 of them walk-up units along the 61 corridor. It is proposing 2 stories of commercial on the northern end, That would be a restaurant. And then it would also have a single retail user on the south side. Kind of getting a little. One thing that you noticed, but you had seen before, is you would have 2 parking decks. So it would be 2-story parking. One level you go down one level you go up one level. It's not a ramp. There's no internal circulation ramping system. You would go from grade down or up. On that 2nd-story ramp that you would come through, you would come up a ramp, an external, I guess, when I talk about ramps, yes, you'd go up a ramp, but you wouldn't have a route ramp. Sorry. Hopefully you're all following me what I just said.
I'm trying hard.
Anyways, you'd go up, and then you actually could go back out into a deck that is exterior above the southern parking lot of the development site. So that development site would still maintain a roadway, would have a private parking lot on the south side of the building. That roadway would extend through all the way again to the Broadway Avenue and that second roundabout, our Christmas tree roundabout. I don't know if there's another name for it at this point. But that southerly lot would actually be a covered parking deck. The developers really heard from this commission that there was a desire to see more parking as possible that could be created in here. They've also looked at our downtown plan. It's identified as a redevelopment opportunity site. One of the goals of the downtown plan is to increase parking capacity. One of the challenges with the development site itself is we're balancing out some competing public policy. We want more public parking where we can get it, more development parking where we can get it, but we also want to have pedestrian amenities and pretty infrastructure. So in reviewing this plan, there is the question of whether or not we're maintaining that view shed and that alignment from Lake Street to Lakeside Memorial Park. If the commission is familiar with the downtown plan, it did envision this as a tree-lined parkway. That tree-lined parkway does result in a massive loss of parking in this area, less than what we would have. In this scenario, whether or not there was a parking deck or not, trees could be planted. There could be some green infrastructure put on each side of the parking, the drive, the parking lot areas, but it does not have that parkway feel, that kind of narrowed development feel. The developers have also proposed having a pedestrian connection from 61 that would lead into the park, lead into the parking facilities, and come along that southern boundary right along into Lakeside Memorial Park. There would be additional private parking that would be accessed from what I'd call the kind of condo townhouse road that exists right now. Overall, when we look at the parking, there's still some challenges with the parking scenario. The development is required by our zoning code to meet 2.3 parking spaces for every residential unit. As a reminder, there are no commercial parking requirements for this development. When you just look at the ramp itself, the development is meeting 1.44 spaces per parking unit. When you add in that ramp plus that 2nd-story deck, they're meeting 1.8 spaces per unit, 1.84 spaces per unit. And then if you add in all of the other parking that's shown, including parking that would be currently in what it would be considered public parking right now, the development site has 2.54 units per parking spaces per unit. The code does allow for reduced parking requirements. I think one of the things the developer is interested in talking with you tonight about is the idea of this parking deck capturing in more parking in this area by going elevated. Elevated in a place where we're not impeding anyone's views other than that single private developer. Really, the residences in this building would probably be most affected. Now, that being said, we did hear from one property owner today in the condo building that is concerned about the inclusion of a deck this close to their property. We did also hear from another property owner that is just concerned about access onto 61 from this location, either here or on the north, and did encourage the city to require a parking study as the development progresses. So Dan Ebert with Gong Companies is here tonight to just, if you had questions for him. But again, as Chair Gerard mentioned, it is a concept plan. It's high-level feedback. It helps them decide whether or not to kind of keep moving forward, revisit some design options. Nothing of this meeting is binding. There is no formal findings tonight.
Questions to
Dick-
staff?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If I understand this right, you were saying that this road that currently goes behind there would still be there, but it would continue under this parking deck?
That is correct.
And that's acceptable by codes? That just
Um,
seems very unusual to me, very odd.
Well,
You got columns within so many feet of an operating roadway.
well, and that still is up for discussions with the city of whether or not this would be an operating roadway per se, or it would be access into this.
Strictly parking acts.
Exactly, you know, whether or
That
not
would, yeah, make more sense.
things could be narrowed through there and it gets into one lane. Those are things that I think all still need to be determined. Right now, it is a public thoroughfare. I don't believe it's a platted road. It's public parking, and so there'd be some negotiations with the city as well in terms of ownership, maintenance, construction, all of that as the development progresses.
It's First Street Southeast. It's a road.
Is
Oh.
it platted as a road?
If it's platted or it's just.
Well, actually,
By
if you look at the
easement or
plat,
something.
if you look at the plat map, which I printed out just from Washington County, the road, what happened to our picture here?
Oh, I'm gonna pull up the. Yeah, so it's like a prescriptive public easement over the parking area. So we own a number of parcels through here, but there is not actually technically, you know, a roadway. So we might call it first, but.
We own all the property the road's on, but when you look at the plat map, it actually shows the street going to the east of
Condos.
56 First.
Yeah.
So it's not where, it doesn't really matter. So and so somewhere down here, as long as we're gonna get right in the heart of the, we have, this is 133 public parking spots currently, correct?
Currently, there is that number. I don't have off the top of my head, but it is in that staff report.
That's the math. Where is the private parking, the easements we have to drive over to get to the public parking? Because from driving back there for years, we own both sides of the road, so I'm a little confused on your narrative of where we have to access public parking over a private easement.
I might have been in error in that, unless I was referencing the development plan where you would have this second-story parking deck potentially over public roadway or public parking and roadway underneath.
Okay. So so we're supposed to have 133 public, we're gonna be down to 70, or roughly half. To me, this is the crux of the matter. Where are the city-owned 70 parking spots in this development?
They are these spaces. And now that being said, that's where matters get a little bit more gray, because we do have a numbering of property lines through here that the city would need to still have discussions with the adjacent landowners in terms of how we realign this, if the city would retain land area through here, or if it, you know, that still is up for discussion. But that would be in that same general area that we already own land, that we already have that parking.
Because as I recall, you can't park overnight in the public lots.
That is correct.
It'd be another ordinance change if someone was staying and they were sharing this, because I noticed a developer mentioned that it would like to have all that is possibly is private, which I don't think I'm all in favor of. So those are my main concern is the loss of public parking spots and the designation of where the public parking is in this development. Susan?
I'm still trying to figure out, in gray is what is considered the new parking that will be part of this development. And so I'm looking just south of the Christmas tree roundabout. And that sort of looks gray, like it's considered to be new parking as part of the new parking numbers. But that building has, quite frankly, not enough parking right now. Where are its dedicated parking? Or is it losing all of its parking and those folks are supposed to be parking on the north side of the Christmas tree roundabout? I'm also kind of trying to look at this and see how there is a connection from the south to the north that links up in any way.
You mean from this parking lot on the south of the Christmas tree roundabout to the northern parking lot?
No, from see where the bend is in the road that comes off of Lake Street?
Mhm.
Yep, there. And then going toward the lake, how does one get north? Or
By
the-
vehicle?
Yes, please. Or even a sidewalk,
So
because
here's
I don't see any sidewalk space.
Sure, here's a sidewalk pedestrian connection. There's also a sidewalk pedestrian connection here. The actual vehicle travel route would be right, oh, can you see my cursor
Yes,
there?
I can.
Commissioner Young? So it would be right through here.
And
So
that
you'd
goes
st-
all the way through.
That goes all the way through to the north Christmas tree.
I guess if I lived in those condos, I'd have kind of an issue with the sidewalk suddenly being the main way of getting to the park from the south.
That is what is called for in the downtown plan. It actually calls for a pretty direct connection where this roadway, that first street that we talked about, becomes kind of a shared access for all along there.
But it was more to be a boulevard, slow with the trees, et cetera, not just a sidewalk in front of my house. In other words, there was gonna be more space.
Well, that parkway never followed this pedestrian connection. That parkway followed this with a narrowed approach through there. So through here, you still had two-way, but you had either angled or parallel parking, which gave it a, what we kind of call a road diet, but was separated from that first street in there.
Other questions of staff?
It kind of looks like we're trying to fit 15 pounds of stuff in a 7.5-pound bag. 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. I think that what we were trying to envision with the downtown plan was something that would be attractive and walkable and encourage use of parks and playgrounds and encourage the use and appreciation of the lake. And basically what this does, especially with the small tot playground, is it absolutely isolates it even more than it is now. But I'm looking forward to hearing more, especially parking, because if we need 250 for the dwelling units, I'm wondering where the restaurant and retail parking is.
There is no requirement for parking for downtown for commercial. We may need it, but that's a separate issue. They don't have a parking requirement. Am I correct?
That is correct. The city code exempts commercial uses from any parking requirements east of Centennial Avenue at Centennial Street.
I'm not gonna parachute into the restaurant.
No, I understand that, and I think that's a challenge in communities that have elected to not have minimum parking requirements, is that question of where would people still park? City cannot impose additional regulations, though, on parking in this area.
Further questions for staff? I believe tonight we have Mr. Dan Ebert from Gone Companies. It's your show.
Thank you for taking the time tonight and the first time around. I really appreciate it. These are very helpful for us. The workshops, working with staff, they've been very helpful we've spent a lot of hours trying to navigate through this outside this meeting, and have found Abby and staff very helpful. I think a high level here is on the project. It's I think maybe Abby, you mentioned 80 units, but it is 100 units. It's 80 units, and then 20 of those units would be considered these townhomes, still rentals and stuff like that, but that would soften the westerly side of the project. And so one of the things that is a reality is we are losing, call it 60,000 square feet of commercial building, and so which does really need parking to some degree. And so there's a swap that we have to just consider. I don't know what the equation is. I really don't exactly know that. If you generally speaking, when we do new commercial buildings and the outlot here, it's five cars per 1,000 square feet for like an office medical. We talked a little about this before. But that would, you could never redevelop this and use the existing parking without putting some sort of a parking ramp to really meet the market for an office medical use for the whole block, okay? Right now, the current parking, I've been with the company for 16 years. There is a change in the guards when there's a restaurant. So there's a reality of what's used by the plaza, with the exception of the Grand, goes away, and then the people that use a restaurant come in. There is a change of the guard there. And so we contemplated that and not wanting to jeopardize our own piece of real estate that's been developed for last 20 years ago, and jeopardize potential tenants that would lease space in the plazas because there's not enough parking. So contemplating that, and then saying, okay, well, viability and all that kind of stuff for a project like this and a redevelopment of tearing everything down, infrastructure, creating parking. That's what led us to do this additional parking that skirts outside of the actual, lots that we own. And furthermore, the only reason why that's a road, well, I guess maybe it just kind of grandfathered in over time, but or was there, wasn't dealt with, but people try to go around, so if there's a stacking on the roundabout, they try to take a right, go up through about 35 miles an hour. And if there's anything, if there could be a speed bump put there, maybe 3 would be great. It really serves no purpose as a road, I don't think. You don't want people going fast through there, especially if you want to try to get a softer feel and make the southern approach to this project and to the lake, more pedestrian friendly, bike or walk. You don't want a lot of traffic, circumventing the roundabout, for example. So kind of knowing that, so we look at it as more as a parking lot at the end of the day, not more of a road. So legally, whatever that looks like and whatever has to happen, that should be contemplated. And then we also see a partnership that would have to deal with, if we did do a parking, over, this, the southern half here. Just because it probably makes more sense to do, and maybe I'm getting too in the weeds here, Abby, but it probably makes more sense to have a master development of this public parking. And so the idea isn't to take away public parking. It's to have a shared approach. So at the end of the day, we would, you know, if there was some sort of a partnership where the developer did improve the parking, public municipal parking, it wouldn't be exclusive to this project, for example. So just want to kind of make that clear. And as far as the southern approach and the pedestrian friendly, we're really trying to make a sidewalk and egress, into the park more feasible for the southern traffic there. And I understand the condo units, issues, but I mean, really, if I looked at them, there's really not many. A transom window probably is on the back side, the west side of these townhomes, and that's about it. Because I mean, the main show is out at the lake, and so I think that's to the benefit of creating this southerly approach here for pedestrians and for people to access it from the southern end. So, okay. What other questions do you have for me?
Susan?
Okay, I understand the changing of the guard concept. I count 21 spaces between your new building and the existing LeGrand building. So the restaurant would not be open until 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm not sure you're gonna find somebody that will do that, but you've still only got 21 spaces there when everybody gets out of the attorneys in LeGrand, et cetera, to go into the restaurant. As someone who used to have Rotary in that, when it was Vanelli's, finding parking during the day at lunch and things like that was really very difficult, especially since a lot of businesses in town liked to use meeting rooms. Lakes Gas always had their monthly employee meetings there. So it is your intention that there would be a changing of the guard and that the parking would by day go to the building toward the lake and after 6 o'clock be part of the restaurant?
Well, I mean,
I'm trying to figure out
sure.
how this is gonna work.
well,
Really?
so, yeah. So I think what we envision is that we'll be parked in our structure, and the structure over that parking deck over, I think will be parked for our project. We're 1.8 cars per unit right now at Lighthouse, and it's working just fine. And so we think that, there is going to be more stalls that are going to be freed up. And so it's not, I mean, so the former Vanelli's, Lone Oak, that's almost 25,000 square feet. It has 2 banquet halls inside it, plus a bar, plus a grill, or patio, plus dining. I mean, you can fit a lot of people. It's a really big patio too. So you could essentially have 3 fairly large gatherings there at one time. And that's just not going to be the case. That's not the intent. There would be an event space, 5,000 square feet, and a main, maybe 2,500 square feet. And that may serve as an amenity to the actual project and the public too, not exclusive to the project, but it's not going to be a really big gathering event center. I wouldn't say event center. So, I mean, I think that's a really big change there too.
So you're not gonna have more than 100 people there at any one time?
I don't know what the capacity would be, but I'm not sure that, I mean, could be more
Including
than 100.
employees?
Could be more than 100. I mean, sure. Yeah.
And where are you gonna put 50 cars?
Well, that would be part of the surface parking. I mean, most time the events are going to be outside of normal business hours. And so you're.
So
you're
y-
the
you do
service
have
plaza,
somebody who would like to run the restaurant after 6 o'clock and not for lunches.
not for lunches?
Right.
Uh, There would be lunches too.
Then you can't do the changing of the guard thing with parking. You can't use that. I like the concept, but you can't use it because folks will still be in the office building and they'll still be at Legrand during lunchtime.
Susan, you are correct. That being said, there's no parking requirement, and we need to get past, my mind, we need to get past that part, because we have apartment issue parkings, and we don't have enough spots for even the people in the apartment. I understand you're gonna let me know where my 70 public spots are on this lot that are public and it's well marked. And then what about the 60 that I lost, or 70 that I lost? Now, I would expect to lose some with all this redoing, and I'll be the first to admit, it's the wild, wild west parking back there now, especially in the winter. But I would expect that we would be close to, let's say, 120 versus 133.
I mean, that parking analysis was done by our downtown planner, so internal staff doesn't have a map that necessarily shows them. We do lose quite a bit of parking, so even though just north of the former Benelli site, the Lone Oak site, that this is privately owned land, we have a public easement for parking. That's a large majority of the parking we would be losing would be to the north of the,
So our 133 public spots include that parking lot?
include parking by easement, yes.
So any guess how many that is besides that lot, and then the other businesses right behind them?
This is probably right here, you've got 12, and here's probably another 7, so close to 20 right here.
21, yeah.
You've got a number of spaces that are kind of, you
That's all
end up with
city.
some double-sided spaces through here that we might end up losing, and probably some in here.
But those are all on city property.
These are on city property, that is correct. They are spaces we have today that if that building was infilled and parking on each side of the road, we would lose those spaces.
You know, my main issue is loss of public parking. And I don't have any problem with the concept of this building or what you want to build. Although I noticed in your narrative, you've now added another floor on top of the restaurant for apartments.
So we had to make up some just based on the more finalization of the plan.
So that,
So-
it'll be up at the same level as the third floor.
Yeah, and then
It'll
step
just
back.
be 10 feet or whatever, 12 feet taller.
Yep.
Okay. Susan?
I realize that our city code does not require parking. But I would be absolutely irresponsible as a planning commission person to say, yeah, I think having a restaurant here and not having any parking associated with it is just a great idea.
Well, I'm not saying it's a great idea, but it's,
Or it's even rational.
well, it's kind of rational. If you move to like Minneapolis or St. Paul, they don't have parking requirements for some of this stuff. You try to park somewhere within a mile of where you want to go eat. Well, we could build a ramp, but that's $8 million according to the downtown plan for 200 spots at 40,000 a spot. Hence why I'm a little interested in where my other spots are. Don?
The condo units on the lake, with the sheet you have up here right now, Abby, how do you get to them? I don't see the road doesn't go there anymore.
Yeah, I think these are just some of those things that end up kind of getting refined as the design, the concept plan gets better fine-tuned. There would have to be some connection from this southerly access point that would come up through here. Where exactly that is right now, I'm not exactly sure.
So what I would throw out there, since we were talking about this road, and that frankly, we'd prefer it not be a road, It'd just be, I don't know if that can be reconfigured so that, okay, yeah, they get access to their lakefront. You know, that it gets narrowed, whatever the minimum, because how many units are there? There, 10, I don't know, 12 units. And then that whole end of the project could, you know, whether it extends down or can be redone, if it's no longer a road and a thoroughfare through there, I would think you can get more parking spaces in there and do more with the garage, with the elevated, and I would think, I don't know, but right now, we're leaving it as a road, and I don't know what that width is. I see 4 parking spaces on the south side, you know, parallel with the road. You know, if you get rid of those and make that part of the roadway going into where those townhouses are, and then can stretch things to the south, you know, if that's no longer gonna be a thoroughfare, I mean, that's gotta be a decision that's gonna be made, but it seems silly for it to be a thoroughfare going through there. Not to mention the logistics of having cars going 35 miles an hour underneath, right in that space. It just doesn't seem like a good idea. But in doing that, you may be able to get more parking spaces too.
Kevin?
2 questions I have for you, Dan. I think I heard Commissioner Gerard say where the restaurant is on the north side, it's no longer going to be a rooftop bar there, or a rooftop patio, or a rooftop open. There's going to be now units above that.
No, there'll be a rooftop.
There will be a
There's gonna be a
rooftop.
rooftop.
Okay. And then the other question I have is regarding the extra parking structure, which I like the idea. Is that going to be limited to just the apartment renters, or will that be public available as well?
Well, the idea was to create more parking for the residents to 1.8, which we feel is probably more than reasonable, just because we've proven it out of other projects and not just us as developer. I mean, we are redevelopers, and so we do come to sites and come to cities and do this type of thing and prove it out. And again, not just us, but others have. So we do think by having the 1.8, and because, we talked a little bit about, it was discussed, the 2.3, per unit. It really depends on how many bedrooms you have. Really depends on your unit makeup. And so we haven't figured that out completely yet, but we know that we'll have a smattering of units, studios and alcoves, 1s and 2s. And I foresee probably bigger 2s on Lakeside, maybe 2 pluses potentially. And it really kind of comes in the affordability of people who want to live on the lake, enjoy the lake, have a view of the lake, be down there, use the park. This is, we see this as just another piece of downtown where more people will be downtown and more people will use the park that don't have to drive. They're already there. So the idea, I mean, we think in our minds 1.8 satisfies, and then everything else, plays the part of the office daytime and then the restaurant nighttime and evening, for example. I think, can we look at like the 3,000 square foot retail? Maybe, if you get rid of that retail, put more parking in down there perhaps, and it's all trade-offs, right? So then we could take more green space out too of the parking. We judicially kind of made that, knowing that the city was wanting some more greenery back there. We would take it all out, because I don't know how visible it's going to really be from 61, so to beautify the project from there to the east to the park is, what are you really accomplishing? How many people are going to see it? It's kind of shoehorned back in there. So we'd be happy with exploring those options of, eliminating some green and putting some more parking in.
Commissioner Miller, or Chair Gerard, may I ask, Commissioner Miller, did you hear the answer though, that the deck The exterior deck parking would be for residents.
residents only. So, and
Yeah.
again, I just wanted Dan to finish. So, so when, so nobody could go into that parking ramp unless they're a tenant in that building. Would not be any public parking in those lower, upper ramps.
For right now, no.
And would that be somehow gated or carded, or so the only way they get in is they had a card, or,
Yeah, just a garage door
okay?
and someone that has a fob,
Which would only leave then whatever parking is on the ground.
the surface
for-
parking,
okay,
correct.
Which some of the tenants could park there as well.
Sure,
Absolutely.
yeah, they
But
could.
not overnight. Because it'd be public parking.
Public.
Somewhere on this map, I have 70
Well,
spots.
well,
No,
Don't know
that,
what
thi-
70
this,
they are.
yeah, this would be public.
Yeah, but-
Maybe the 26 on the south portion is not.
That I didn't include as part of the
Yeah.
parking.
I
the
assume
public
this whole
parking.
middle,
All the public parking is all through the middle through here.
all the dark
None of
gray.
that would allow overnight parking.
You know, and perhaps we just take a look at the 26 stalls there
But the-
and think through that a little bit, because that's 26, 3,000 square feet. Depends on what the use is, and I'm not an absolutely huge fan of retail. I've kind of made that known anyways. And so I think if there's some discussion here, we'd be open to seeing how much more we can maximize it and maybe looking at what that would look like as a public parking option.
But are you in agreement that the gray area running down the middle and to the right, that would be all public parking?
Yeah,
Yeah, everything right down the middle and
Yep.
just underneath the existing Gone building is public parking. This little area here and this little area here are the ones that are questionably not right now a part of the public parking calculation. But I think what we're hearing Dan say is that I think he's favorable to the conversation of potentially public easements on anything that's surface level to help offset some of that. That's again, I think, part of the overall development discussions. So I think what I'm hearing tonight from the commission is there's still concern about parking. There's certainly some concern about pedestrian connectivity and connectivity to that park, even what is the impact going to be to these condos in terms of access into there. I heard from Commissioner Steeler that reevaluating this whole access point and access into here might be something the city wants to consider. I'm not hearing a whole lot of opposition, though, to, again, those uses, the restaurant on the north side, retail on the south side. It really is coming down to just that, what is those fine parking numbers? Is that what I'm hearing? Am I hearing this correctly?
I have a little bit of over this restaurant, what my view looks like now. I mean, one of the things we had asked is for we're coming down we had a lower drop, and now we've just bumped it up a full, I don't know if I call it a full floor because they were gonna do a rooftop deck, but now they got apartments going in there. So at some point, there's a wall going up. I don't know exactly where, but apartment building does require a wall, so I assume it'll be up another floor there.
yeah, no, and those are all great, great observations. So as we kind of tool this, we'll work it out, and if we were to, I mean, there's options here to maybe get rid of the retail, extend the units, to the south, and then, I mean, there's definitely movement within here too. So, I think one of the bigger questions we would like to get answered, or at least start to discuss, is this additional ramp that really goes into the public domain, to see if the city's receptive of looking at that and really partnering with the developer on really trying to redevelop that whole area that captures the the park plan, downtown plan, and helps us solve problems for parking, if they're interested in.
What do you mean by partnering with the developer?
Well, what I mean is all the parking you see now, it has to be redone. You know, stalls, curbs, circulation, how we then put the deck over, that, the southern half. That you can't say, okay, well, we'll have, the city do this part and the developer do this part. I'm saying you can't, but it's probably more economical to look at this through a private, way than a public $8 million, structure that the city would put up. Now, we're not asking the city to put up the structure, but generally speaking, to go through private, there's just different ways we can do this. So. I
Chair
guess that's what
Gerard,
I'm-
if I may, I think the big question for this commission, because there is a lot of discussions that do need to occur between the city and the developer about the use of this land, the sale of this land, how it all gets done, and a lot of that starts to creep out of this commission's realm. I think the big area that the commission needs to comment on is the idea of this elevated parking in this area, whether or not you're favorable to that inclusion in that area, whether or not you think that it's going to conform to closer to any of the adopted plans, how this could be, lessen impact, that sort of thing. From here, we'll end up bringing some of these plans right to the city council to talk about some of these policy-based discussion items as well, and probably get more into some of that conversation of public-private partnership and development.
Kevin?
So Dan, you'd mentioned potentially you'd consider eliminating the retail. You're not a big fan of it. If you did that, and if you considered that, would it not make a little bit more sense, instead of doing the big covered ramp down the public roadway currently, on the end where you have those 26 spots, couldn't you make that a 2-story ramp and access that from your second story if you're going to eliminate the retail, and just keep that all then to yourself with its own entrances, so you're not even having to deal with the public parking?
Potentially, yep. Mhm. So potentially we just extend the project down further to the south.
Correct.
Cover everything. Yep.
Correct.
Mhm. That would be an option too.
Susan?
Abby, I don't have any elevations here, so I don't know what that second story is going to look like. If it's a big honking concrete wall that doesn't have any design or style or something, that's entirely different to me than if there's some sort of interest. So
If he brought it to the end, like he potentially may do, you could still then do the nice treed parkway that we originally talked about and have the decent road access to the townhomes.
So, but she asked, what do we think about the elevated parking? And I don't know what I think about I mean, the concept is cool, but I kind of need to know what it's going to look like as you're coming down Broadway, because what we have heard over and over and over again, as long as I've been here, is wanting Lakeviews, wanting to make a connection, and I just you've already got the wall to the north, and what would it look like and how would that play?
What do you mean by the wall to the north?
That the building to the north that has the rental and retail, the 3-story building on the northeast corner of Lake and Broadway?
Oh, the Park Place building?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's like,
Well, it's nice though. It's not just, I will say that.
yes, sir.
Okay.
So
Susan?
I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Young, and I can completely understand we're all visual people, right? It's a lot harder to envision something of that nature. So this would be the approach kind of coming into that back parking lot, and that second story ramp would be coming off about this height. Now, that being said, this is, I think, a taller than that traditional first floor. However, you might have some up and down because of the parking deck size. But you can kind of think about what would be that, I think, idea of what would feel like a drive-through parking in this area. I wouldn't want the developer to start developing things like renderings if all of a sudden it was a no way. We have design standards. It can't just be a big concrete building or a big concrete block. It'll have to be pretty if faced with something or something of that nature. But I think it's the idea of that almost like building feel through here, because that's what it's going to feel like, of whether or not the commission has some input on that. I did look before we brought this to you, just at the idea of impeding view of that single story. Really, those condos, as we all know, look out to the lake, but and I got a little too far, but coming in through here, you really don't have any existing residential or commercial users that are going to be impacted by that. How that interacts with those condo units and even the Park Plaza, is that what you call it?
The plaza.
The Plaza building. All that will need to kind of be figured out. How do you lessen any sort of potential impact? But I wouldn't want the developer to keep moving forward with any sort of concept designs if this commission just thought, no way, that is not feasible, or we don't like it at all.
Karen has something.
Chair, I do have two people that joined online, and there has been a couple comments typed into the chat box. So
Well, this is a concept. We typically don't take public comment. Not opposed to it.
I would be interested in knowing what this is.
Tell them to hold on for a couple minutes till we settle out some of this other stuff with Abby, because there's been a nice gentleman sitting in the back, and something tells me he would like to give us his 2 cents. So, Kevin?
I just want to say, Dan, we're really excited about the project. I think it's going to be a wonderful project. I'd really like to see it come to fruition. We are just trying to be, maybe we shouldn't even be talking about it, but we're more concerned about how the citizens are going to deal with the parking.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, obviously, it's great.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the feedback. Parking's important to us too, so I don't want to say this, I think I can say this because we office right there, right? The owner of the company office is right there. So, and we don't want to, Legrand Salons, it's a 20-year relationship there, so we don't want to do anything that would affect Cindy in a negative way and her profitability, her growing her business, etc. So we know that, and so we're just throwing some ideas out here. Parking structures, does that make sense? Does that help solve a problem for downtown parking? Doesn't solve it. The visual isn't worth it to do that. Something we could do is we could do a visioning where we could do an approach to the southern part of the project to show what that structure would look like from the road, so we could see that. I think that would be a good exercise to do, and that we would do if we want to keep exploring that option.
Excuse me, Justin?
I like the idea, so I'm kind of losing my voice tonight. I like the idea of possibly removing the retail space and adding some parking ramp in that area too. The other thing that I'm very much for, and you spoke about it, was dealing with the safety issue of impatient drivers trying to take that back road. I wonder if there's a way to eliminate that road entirely, but give that access to those condo units, but still have, some space for people to walk. And possibly, I don't know how this would work, but possibly being able to widen the road to the main roundabout on the right to have kind of a right turn lane, because right now there really isn't one. It's kind of pseudo there, but if there was more of an access there for a right turn lane, then that could really help with, those people who, want to get into that, to access that area and not have to go from the south. It's just a thought. But I'm really for trying to do whatever to increase safety in that area too, which I think would,
Justin,
Yeah.
that was designed as a two-lane roundabout,
correct.
but we couldn't figure out how to drive it, and so MnDOT made it a one-lane.
Right. I do remember that.
So maybe they'll take the train wheels off pretty soon. Maybe, we'll see.
You know, we're getting there.
Yeah.
So, as regards to the parking structure over the public parking, I have no problem with that. Having spent a fair portion of my younger years in Chicago, it's no different than driving downtown underneath the L tracks or Lower Wacker Drive. So I don't have any problem with it at all. As long as, and I don't even, not concerned on the south approach, except for what the townhomes will see. I'm more concerned about the north approach being right at where most of our city parking is. At that end would look good, off at a roundabout there. That would be my
Yeah, no,
concern.
that's absolutely marquee downtown. So that will look good. That, the transition from the walkouts to the restaurant and that facade will look good, for sure.
Any other comments?
I mean, without getting too in the weeds, if you're gonna have a road go underneath, you're gonna need 14-foot 2 clear underneath, which is gonna, then your decks are gonna be probably 30 inches in depth. That elevation of that garage over that roadway is gonna be considerably higher than the parking level adjacent for the, unless you raise that up. But I mean, I think you've got an elevation issue there because of the clearance needed at the road, as opposed to what you need in a parking area strictly, which is 7 foot. But anyway, that's, you know what I mean?
You gotta have room for deliveries, and you gotta. have
Right,
room
right.
for
You got,
people
if you're gonna
moving
have
in and out,
if it's gonna be a road, you've gotta have
Right.
road clearance. If it's a parking garage, all you need is the minimum 7 foot, or they build them to 7'2", whatever, so.
Even with the residences in the restaurant, you gotta have a place where,
Oh, yeah,
where deliveries can be made, moving in and out, yada, yada.
right, if it's, yeah, anyway.
Good. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other
Appreciate the time.
questions for us?
No, I think you give us some good feedback here. So I didn't hear no on the parking ramp over. It's a work in progress still. Okay.
Yeah, we are going to take a little bit, even though it's not a public hearing, we will take some public comment, so you may want to have a comment after they're finished.
Sure, absolutely.
We'll start with the gentleman, if you would like to say a couple words. He's been sitting here patiently. We do ask that you state your name and address for the record, and then spend a couple of minutes giving us your thoughts.
Thank you. Gene Gertismeyer, 89 First Street Southeast, Forest Lake. I'm a member of the board of directors of that association that is just east of your project. Deeply concerned about what's going to happen when the sun goes down if this thing goes up. You're right. That structure will be taller than the current Gong building, plus whatever they need to build higher up. It seems to us, and this is the board talking amongst ourselves, that the cost of this ramp building structure you guys want to help fund, I don't know if it's a partnership, I'm not clear on whose money this is, but if I was going to fix this picture, I would offer those 12 units $12 million. Take that out of your picture. Now you've got a lake property, a park, the parking you need, all the public access to improve this part of your city, that if you guys have been trying to put 15 pounds in a 7-pound bag, it ain't gonna work. He can redesign and he can rethink this, but he needs space. You guys, talking to Mara, talking to all the people in town, want to make this the center of your city. You got to get rid of that roundabout. You've got to fix it, okay? That means moving it so it is a 4-lane like you've done on the south end here, where trucks and things can move through it. then people will have confidence to ride 61 and not get run over, be able to move through this. Now you got a nice walkway you can build to your whole, make this whole thing a beach if you want to. It just seems to me that we're trying to shoehorn something in here and spend 8 million or whatever it is to build a ramp. Get rid of that ramp idea. I'll talk to the board. I'll talk to our owners. You guys mull it over. If you think you can redesign this to make it work, because you got infrastructure problems here. We got a street in front of our house that's a street that don't go anywhere, because back in 1980, when you had the skating rink here, the road went around it. Nope, Gong built the building in the way, cut the road off. The city still plows and maintains that road, but all the business traffic goes through the alley. It's technically an alley, if you look at it. I didn't want to throw that option out there, but we've talked about it. Could we go somewhere else for $1 million apiece? Yes. Yes, we could. It's like take one for the team. If you guys can make it work, I don't see how this is going to work without redesign. If you need more property, now you got a big, beautiful park you can build to. Do it. Think about it. But you're right, Susan. You can't put 15 in a cell.
Thank you. Aaron, you have someone online?
I do. I have two people online, and forgive me if I pronounce the last name incorrectly. I have Greg and Rita Blazer. And there's two comments. It says, the comment about the parking lot not being a road ignores the fact that residents and visitors to the townhouses find the best way to get in and out of the townhouse development is through the parking lot. If the parking is not done properly, the access to the townhomes would be severely limited. The map shown does not even show a road coming in and out of the townhouse development. This needs to be addressed in the plans. That was the first comment. Second is, it is now almost impossible to get in and out of the south entrance to First Street by Daniela's. Adding the apartments as outlined will only bring even more traffic to the area, making it even more difficult to get in and out to Highway 61. Access through the thoroughfare to get to the roundabout is an absolute need for the townhouse residents.
Thank you. And that's all the public comments you have? Thank you. Commissioners, before I ask if we have any more questions, Administrator Casey, you've been sitting here patiently. You look like you want to say a few words about this development.
Sure. We have a very, very long way to go. Parking is only one of the issues. We haven't even begun for the public to start talking any terms, what's going to happen with the city-owned land, how that arrangement's going to be made. But right now, as the commission points out, parking is still the #1 issue before we go down any other road.
All right, so we're all on page?
Yeah, we're all on page. I mean, we're not at the point where we can even begin to conceptualize who's going to pay for what, or if anybody's going to pay for anything, and what the final design is going to look like. There's a lot of issues with the city owning a lot of property through there. And yeah, do we want to still have that as a road? Do we want to give up that road and say, here, it's all yours? How does that play into the public parking? There's a lot of moving pieces here. You'll probably be back before you in a few more times before this is over.
And then there's going to be discussion with the council?
Yes, the next step is a concept with the council to see if they're comfortable with what you've seen tonight with some of your comments. I mean, their concerns will probably be very close to your concerns with parking and how that transfers through and how everybody goes through there and what's going to happen to the townhomes and things like that.
Susan?
Remembering when we were doing the reconstruction on Lake Street, and Broadway. Has the city engineer given you any thoughts about whether we've got the water and sewer and gas infrastructure to support that number of residential units?
We did a downtown study on the sewer. That's got the capability of doing that. There's a small fix we have to do, but this would not impact that fix. And we have capacity for water. The challenge here, like most of downtown, is the stormwater.
Any commissioners, any final comments, either for the developer or for staff? Hearing none. Do you have any questions for us?
I do not. I think have the direction we need to kind of keep moving forward with the development team, and we'll keep you posted on the progress.
Dan, anything else you needed from us? Okay, thank you. All righty. If I can find somewhere I have an agenda. Oh, we missed our other section, but we'll have that anyways, even though we approved the thing. And I'll start with, do we have Councilperson Munson on the line?
I do not.
Okay. Administrator Casey, anything?
No.
Abby?
I just want to say it's the last meeting of the year. I want to thank all of the commissioners for their service this year. I know that I believe there's a couple terms that are up this year. I hope to continue to serve with you in 2024. If you haven't already been contacted, I believe Mayor Bain will reach out regarding those future appointments, but also want to wish all of you and your family happy holiday season.
Thank you. Ken?
Nothing except we're looking forward to 2023.
Perfect. Karen?
No comments.
Justin?
No comments.
Kevin?
Yes, I do have a comment. So a number of weeks ago, we reviewed an industrial facility on Highway 97 near the interstate properties. It was going to be, it was rather
Hard
large
Factory?
project. And one of the things that came up in my mind later on was water used on that site. I mean, I not only for this site, but any other site too, where there's business, like even interstate or someone else who started with, let's say you just had a few vehicles in your business, now you've got 30 of them and you're washing them. And that water runs into Clear Lake, if you're that close to Clear Lake. And do we have regulations regarding water exiting a site being treated? I know I used to work in a manufacturing facility in Maple Grove, and we had to install a very extensive system for every drop of water had to be collected, treated before it left the site. And so that just kind of came up in my mind. Do we as a city have regulations along those lines? Because that business in particular that's going in there is a concern if they're washing their product after it comes out of the manufacturing, and that with an acid wash is possible they may. So anyway, that's just something in my mind that came up, and I just wanted to get it out there and see if it has been addressed by the city, and if not, something we should think about.
We do have stormwater requirements, as well as the watershed district do. And we do treat impervious surface areas, or do require treatment on impervious surface areas. So if that cleaning is occurring outside and it is landing on that impervious surface, those areas are captured and treated.
When we say treated, how do
Or
we-
infiltrated, typically.
I'm talking about if they're using acids or chemicals, or they're washing oils off of product, and those oils are going right. I mean, it's not an impervious issue, it's a chemical issue into the.
We can look at their specific system. I'm not sure if the city has specific standards, but we definitely I can let you know. Are you looking at whether or not we overall have standards, or that specific development, or both?
I'm just thinking in general. It's
Sure.
something we need to be concerned. I mean, our two most valuable resources, I think, are the two lakes. And if we're now starting to develop bigger industrial facilities around, that water needs to be treated, captured and treated, beyond just, you know, impervious or pervious treatment, I mean, actual cleaned.
And the use of chemicals, like you say, if there's chemicals, that may come under the State Pollution Control Board to address, or at council. But we will look into see what kind of controls are there.
But, yeah, okay, and I don't know what, like, if someone just washing a vehicle with regular soap and water, for you and I in our driveway cleaning our car, it's no big deal, but if they're cleaning 30 vehicles every Saturday, it suddenly becomes a bigger deal. But anyway, just something to, food for thought for, as we move.
Thank you. Susan? Well, all I want to do is wish all the commissioners a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, as well as the staff. Special thanks to Administrator Casey for gracing us with your presence today. We appreciate you showing up every now and then. So with that, the chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Have a great evening.